this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. We do that every week by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. And we have our ongoing Crowbar Awards. Check those out. And welcome back to Adjunct, the segment where we learn from the best advertising educators in the world. So we know college courses can cost hundreds of dollars. So heck, this is our attempt to give you the best lecture from the best lecturers for free, $0. And historically, our past adjunct guests have predominantly been professors of practice or lecturers, which in academia usually means they have years of industry experience. But today we have on Dr. María de Moya, Tombras professor of advertising at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. Cue the song Rocky Top. Throughout her career in academia, Dr. María de Moya has sought opportunities to contribute to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as an advocate for those underrepresented in higher education. As she served in those roles, it became clear to Dr. de Moya that she wanted DE&I to be the center of her career. So she began searching for a job to fit that passion. When she saw an open position for the newly created Charles Tombras Senior Endowed Professorship at the Tombras School of Advertising and Public Relations, she knew she had found the right fit for her goals. So in this episode, we explore a career route in advertising that we have not explored really ever before. We talk about those who long for learning and teaching. So Maria walks us through the process of becoming a Ph.D. professor. She provides a glimpse into the tedious 3 to 4 year process to become a doctor and gives insight on what your professors might be up to when they are not in the class. As well, she provides her advice from an academic standpoint on how to break in and thrive in advertising. I love this episode. I find it so interesting what they go through and the whole process to be a tenure track professor, to be tenured. All of that is exciting stuff. So I hope you enjoy. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast Adjunct Edition. And as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, Professor María de Moya. Welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Heck yeah, where are you at today?
I am in Knoxville, Tennessee, northwest of the city.
Cue the Rocky Top song, right? How
Don't
many
tell
times have you
anybody I
heard that?
haven't learned it.
You will, because you,
Um,
you
um,
just started recently, right?
yes, I started in January. I faked my way through it in graduation. I don't think anybody noticed. But by the time people hear this, I probably will have memorized it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to give you an excuse, I mean, you've only been there for 8 months, and summer break is a couple of those months. I'm assuming,
Yeah.
because you are a Tombras. How do you pronounce it?
Second one, Tombras.
Tombras professor
Yeah.
of advertising at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So we'll talk about that. But you just started 8 months ago. So what's that like? Tell me about that. What does that mean?
Well, I came from DePaul University in Chicago, a place that is still very dear to my heart. So it's been a big cultural shift in Chicago. One of the things that I liked and I missed was the cultural mix, people of all places, foods of all places. That's one of the best things. I'm a big museum person. But what I've gained on this side is honestly, people are extremely nice and neighborly. I don't think I've ever lived in a place where people are just genuinely interested in you. So that's been great. And I left amazing colleagues who I miss out every day, but I also have amazing colleagues here. So I'm
Mhm.
I'm doing well. It's been a change, but it's been a good change.
This is interesting because we're connected here because I'm in the Lincoln Park area of Chicago. DePaul is right down the street from me. So I pass by it all the time. We've had on some other people Marshall Goldman was on this
Yeah.
show, who was great. I think he's a professor there as well, a couple months ago. So I think that's an interesting conversation to get into. And you alluded at the diversity and the different neighborhoods in Chicago that we are known for. And I'm sure a lot of other big cities too. It's just those different neighborhoods where people come together. Um, it's definitely an amazing city, right? It's just one of those big cities that I always recommend for people to, is a great ad city as well. So yeah, what else was the biggest shock to you, or cultural change that you've noticed going to Knoxville?
So I went to the University of, pardon me, University of Florida for my PhD, and it was big football culture. So I kind of feel like I'm back at that. I haven't Football season is just starting, so I haven't been to football games, um, and I think that's the big shift. Also, there's a lot of campus life. So DePaul has an amazing program because it's in the middle of this. Well, in addition to amazing faculty, but it's in the middle of the city, right? So agencies are down the street. Our students got to go to them during classes and all that wonderful thing. So here, the campus is where the life is centered. It's very different. So our
Right.
students at Tennessee, they do get to visit agencies, but we do trips to DC, to New York. They have to go out of town to visit those agencies.
Right. It's a little
It's a
bit bigger of a deal, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they do get the experience. I think the program has done very well in doing that. But yeah, I think it's the difference between living mainly on campus, so doing most of your work and your learning on campus, versus balancing that campus and city perspective, which, depending on faculty and students, each person likes something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And for students, and especially at a great school like University of Tennessee, a lot of times recruiters will come to campus and they know
Yeah,
that it's a hub for recruiting, so they'll make trips out there. A lot
yeah,
of times, like they'll do like these campus visits. So you really have to make sure, if you are. This is how it was for me at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, 2.5 hours south from Chicago.
yeah,
Um, so it wasn't super close. So you really have to take full advantage of those opportunities, right? When these recruiters are on campus, or you have to go to Chicago. For us, it was Chicago, and really make like those trips a big thing all throughout your 4 years of undergrad. Because if you start late, I mean, compared to those that live in these cities, NYU University, or NYU or DePaul, Loyola, insert big city schools, they're living in it. They can go down the street and get coffee. So it's a really good point for sure.
yeah.
Um,
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Tombras agency. So our school is named after the Tombras Advertising Agency, and it
mhm.
is down the street. It's very close. Our students go there. I think the main difference is Chicago, you had, I don't know, dozens of agencies. Here you have a handful, but our program has a great partnership with Tombras and people also in
That was
advertising.
recent, right? That was like a couple of years ago that the name changed, correct?
It was
I-
a little over a year ago. Yeah.
Okay, so it was, I do recall. So
Yeah.
this agency, let's talk about it. So it's near campus is it in Knoxville?
It's on downtown Knoxville, but they have offices in many other places, including New York and Atlanta.
Hmm.
And the it's a family-owned agency, and
Hmm.
the um, grandfather that founded it, and I believe the father, definitely the grandson who's heading it now,
Hmm.
attended University of Tennessee, so they had a
Right.
strong relationship with UT Knoxville. And thanks to the great work of my chair, Beth Foster, and our dean, Joseph Maser, we got this name school. I believe it's only the second in the country.
Hmm.
For the
Stan
life of me,
Richards.
I don't remember the other one.
Well, you're saying named after an agency or a person?
Named in general. So
Yeah.
usually
So
colleges, yeah, they named colleges. So you have the Cronkite School and others. So that happens, but in a school of public relations and advertising, it's very
yeah.
rare.
Yeah, for the
Um,
specific, because usually it sits in, and I want to get to this as well,
yeah,
because usually the ad major sits within like a college of communications or journalism or a mix of the two. So, and I want to walk through that. So the naming, so there was a sponsorship or a partnership deal made. So
yeah,
Tombras, sorry,
yeah. Tombras.
Tombras made this deal. They're nearby. I'm sure they recruit a boatload of students, and it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense if they have an affinity for the school being there.
And they also wanted to support efforts to diversify the field because, our field struggles with lack of representation. And part of it is that people who are in marginalized communities don't pick a career in advertising, they don't see
Mhm.
themselves in that career. So that's why the endowed professorship position that I have was created. It was created to help advance that. So, yes, absolutely, we have a strong relationship. They do employ our graduates and our students intern there. It's super competitive, right? So it's not just that you will get an internship before because you came here, but many of our students get that internship at that job.
There's a pipeline, you're saying,
Yeah.
right, but it's not a guaranteed thing. You still have to
So,
work hard and
right.
sell yourself apart and listen to all the advice that we've accumulated in the past 211 episodes,
Yes.
right? You still have to do the work, show good
Yeah,
portfolio
absolutely.
pieces, network, get a real experience, have a couple internships,
Yeah.
or be the president of your club. These are just some of the schemes, we call it, that we've talked about. But you're absolutely right, and I think that's a really good notifying point. And not all the students, I'm sure, work at Tombras.
No. And not all of them want to go into agency life. Some do end up going
Mhm.
client side, going in house.
Or
But
teaching,
it's great
I'm
to have
assuming.
that. They end
Mm.
up teaching a few years back. I just met somebody who had graduated a master's from our program and then went on to do a PhD at another university. And now she's applying to our position
There
at
we
Ray.
go.
So, yeah, you never know.
No, and I want to, because also I want to talk about that on adjunct. It's called
Mhm,
adjunct, meaning
mhm.
it's a play on the word ad. But you're a
I like
professor. You did it. I mean,
Yeah.
you're far from an adjunct. Anybody can be an adjunct. I mean, not anybody, but like there's really low requirements, experience. You're competent. You've done well in the
Yeah.
field. You can adjunct without a master's sometimes at some
So,
schools.
yeah, I was going to
You are
say
not that.
I was an adjunct. I started as
Sure.
an adjunct. I cut the bug as an adjunct. So I was
Hmm.
born and raised in the Dominican Republic. I immigrated for the PhD and then stayed here and have worked as a professor. But when I started adjuncting, because I switched from journalism to PR, and I wasn't used to having a 9 to 5 job because journalism was 12 hours. So a friend of mine had just become the chair of a program and she said, "Will you teach?" And I said, "Wonderful, I will." And then I ended up liking teaching more than I liked anything else.
No,
So that's why I ended
absolutely.
up going for the PhD. But yeah, depending on the school, it can be incredibly difficult to be an adjunct.
Of
In
course.
some schools, there's less requirements because honestly, there are less people, there's less competition. But if you want to be an
Sure.
adjunct at a top school, yeah, you have to have years of
Hmm.
experience and a graduate
Supply and
degree.
demand, for
Yep.
sure. But to be a professor,
Yeah.
right? And that's different from a lecturer, which
Yes.
we've had on lecturers, also known as like instructors, or sometimes they get the professor of practice
Yeah.
title, which is they've had a lot of experience and it does not always require a PhD.
No.
So you have a terminal degree, meaning the highest level of educational excellence in your field.
Oh, I
Where
like
did you
that.
get your PhD at?
University of Florida, go Gators. If you don't say go Gators right after University of Florida, I've been told they will take away your degree.
There you go. Just cover your bases. But now you can't say that in Knoxville. You'll get in trouble there.
I would not dare to say it on campus. Yes.
No, no, don't do that, and don't say "Roll Tide." Oh
I
my
am not
goodness,
that brave. No, I wouldn't
that
dare.
SEC culture. I mean, that I'm curious. I'm a Big Ten person, which is is intense for sure, but nowhere near the historical rivalries, which we don't have to get into.
I remember being swept up. I mean, it's a great advertising and PR case study, right? Because I remember
Mhm.
being swept up in the culture. And I come from Baseball Nation. I'm Dominican, so
Yeah,
all our
the best
culture is
baseball.
baseball. So I get it, but I still don't understand the game of American football, but I follow it because you have to. It becomes part of the conversation, part of day-to-day life when you're at a big school like this, an SEC school.
So you graduated. So you pursued your PhD. What was your uh? You said PR was your field of study.
Yes and no. I mean, it is PR, but I always make the caveat because most people understand public relations as corporate communication. And that's not where my heart is. I teach it, but my area is more social movements, so strategic communication or communication for social change. Same tactics that you use to promote a
Mhm.
brand or product, but to promote a cause or an idea.
I like that. And actually, we could talk for hours about this movement of purpose-driven work in
Yeah.
advertising and
Oh,
PR.
yeah.
A lot of times, like Havas, where I work, our big thing is to make meaningful work. And that's based off this study that we do that 75% of brands can disappear today and nobody would care,
Yeah.
which is astounding. So like we live at Havas to provide meaning and make sure that our clients are not a part of that 75%. They're in that 25% that people would give a damn if one of our clients disappeared for some reason and know about it because they stand for something. So that's very high level. And so with your field and your study within this social movement and for like mass communications, I guess what was your dissertation and what was that about?
Yeah, so I studied diaspora organizations, so basically organizations of people from one nation living in another, and how they build community and how they advance their issues. So think about Israelis living in the U.S.
Hmm.
or the Indian immigrants or Dominican immigrants. So we have issues to advance locally, but we also have issues to advance in our homeland. So using my own homeland as an example, we are a young democracy with sadly a lot of biases because it's a young democracy. Because we're a country that is closely dependent to the United States, the immigrants here and the Dominican Americans born here have a lot of voice. In fact, they have a seat in the Dominican Congress. So they actually do organize and act collectively using social media, advertising, big events like the Dominican Day Parade in New York, all these to bring people together to keep them attached to the culture so that when we need to bring about change, we're able to do that.
So there's probably some really important learnings and lessons within that culture that can be applied to mass communication, some of those best practices. What was like the most astounding, one of the biggest insights that you recall that you still think about?
Oof. Well, one of the things that I still think about is how governments are frequently taken by surprise with things that they really should not be taken by surprise by. Like I think especially
The
in young
government
democracies,
being the
yeah,
government being late to understand something?
government being late to understand the power of people despite being proven over and over again.
Sure.
And I think it happens in the US, but it especially happens in small countries because when democracy is unstable, in small, unstable democracies, I should say, then it's easier to shake up. So there's many, many examples. But what's interesting and what I would like people to think about is we are talking about the same tools that you use to get people to change from one brand of energy drink to the other. Like the
Mhm.
tools don't change. What changes is the application. And I think that's beautiful and that's powerful because a lot of people don't think about the application of our field to bigger things, not only to brands, but also to social change. So that's what excites me. That's why I love teaching in this area.
I do like that. It's powerful and probably super effective.
Yeah,
So
it has been.
got it. Got it. So when did you wrap that up? And then, so
Mhm.
the PhD takes what, 4 years
Yeah, some people
on
finish it
average?
in 3 years. In my experience as an observer, because I finished it in four. So
Hmm.
my peers that finished it in three, they finished it in three because they knew what they wanted to do from the beginning.
Right. They had an
It took
idea.
me a little while to figure it out. I honestly had a very vague idea of what doing a PhD was going to be like. I mean,
But
I have
you just
this.
went into it.
I went into it because I knew it was a requirement for teaching, and
Right.
I always mention
You
my
caught the
advice.
bug from adjunct
Yeah, and
and
I
then
wanted
you
to do
want to
that.
do it full time.
My advisor was Juan Carlos Moya. Now he's dean at Oregon University, and he is Venezuelan. So I think he was a godsend because he knew the things that I didn't even know to ask. So it took me 4 years. I can honestly tell you that I would have done five if I would have had the funding, but everybody says the best dissertation is a finished dissertation. So I did that. 4 years is good. If you can
Got
afford it,
it.
if you have support, do 4 years. Yeah.
You know, our audience are aspiring advertisers,
Mhm.
but we might inspire somebody to pursue a PhD. So can we talk high level about
Yeah.
the PhD experience? Just like, there might be some listeners that are curious because you are one of our first terminal degree adjunct guests, and I will promote it that way. So if we can inspire one person to get a PhD, what would you say to that person? Like, what can they expect? What can they fear? What can they get excited about?
There's a lot to fear in the PhD program. I don't know if I want to get into that. I guess I'll touch on it. But what is exciting about the PhD is that it's a luxury to take the time to really kind of get to the nitty gritty of your field. So many things that we do. So you're creating an ad and you're like, oh no, we want to use humor instead of fear. And you kind of know why. And this kind of know that you don't even remember where you learned comes from theories that have been developed and been tested for 30 years. So you are at the forefront of what's going to be the practice in the future. That's the exciting thing. Um, it is difficult because it can be very easy to fall into the trap of competition. So that's something that I learned very quickly. I had some amazing classmates that were at a speed that I was not going to be able to be at. They were
But aren't you
presenting.
guys like picking different like topics, like specialty topics? Like how can you get competitive and not like explain that to me because you are pursuing all great individually different pursuits unless there is somebody also doing what you're
No,
doing.
it's more about, well, there's so depending on your field, there's always a few people doing similar work, but
Yeah, in
that's
the
not
same
it.
sphere maybe, but never like truly pointed in the same direct like hopefully it's not the same out like expected outcome.
So the great thing about a PhD in our field is that you can go to the industry if you want to, right? Because it is a research degree. If you want to go to agency, if you want to go in house, you're going to find jobs.
Oh,
Um,
right.
but many of us want to go to academia, and the way that we land
Mm.
the good jobs or the better jobs, and better includes less teaching load and better pay, has to do with how much research we have published. So if you're doing
Uh,
one topic and I'm doing another, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when you submit that CV for consideration, how many publications do you have? So I had colleagues who came in with publications. It took me.
what journals? Like, what are your target publications? Like, what's the gold standard for our industry? I do PR, so I'm
Yeah,
always looking at headlines, getting
yeah,
publications. I want to get Ad Age and Ad Week first and foremost
yeah.
every time,
Oh,
and it's hard. So, like, what are your publications that are the gold
yeah.
standard?
So Journal of Public Relations Research and Journal of Advertising, unless I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure those are the top of our field.
Yeah,
Um,
you get published in that. That's good. Like, you want that
yeah,
you hit a home run. And how
yeah.
many do you want of those? Like, what's the ideal number by the time you finish your dissertation?
Oh,
How
by the
many of
time
those?
no, if you've published in one of those, by the time you finish your dissertation, you are like
Oh, okay.
an
So you
Olympian.
finish your dissertation and that's what gets published in these journals? Is that the goal?
Sometimes, so you shoot wherever I don't know how to explain it. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah. You're
depending on the
pitching it.
quality of the work, you know where it's a good fit. So for example, I do work that sometimes has been published in Journal of Strategic Communication, but I also have one in a journalism journal. So depending on the actual research topic, you can shop
Yeah.
it around a little bit. But the problem is, this into consideration. For me to publish 2 a year, which was about what I tried to do at DePaul, and I will say that's a slow rate because
Two
it's
a
a lot
year
higher.
as a student in a PhD
Oh
program
no,
or
as a
two?
student in PhD, no, as a faculty member. As a
Okay.
student PhD program, I had submissions. I didn't even have publications when I graduated.
Okay.
Others did,
I
and
was trying to
now
understand the actual when when you're a student, you were saying it gets competitive because you're looking at publications and you're looking at the same small job pool.
right.
Am I so
But at
being a student, the expectation is like if you get published, it's above and beyond.
yes,
Okay.
yes, and it has become more common. So I graduated 2011. a while ago, but not like 50 years ago.
No, no.
And like I said, I graduated with papers under review that thankfully got published right after I graduated, but I was able to land a good job with that. Now, when I look at candidates, they have publications already. So now PhD students, I feel that are under even more pressure. And there were a few of my classmates who graduated with publications, but not all of us graduated with publications. And we also have conference presentations. That's another number that is counted when you're a PhD student.
Gotcha.
So a lot of the time you're working on your research, you take some classes, you build relationship with faculty that have similar topics that can work with you on research, and you learn to teach by teaching. Depending on the program, you have the opportunity to teach. At Florida, I did get to teach. I taught a big lecture class, 225 students. That was tough, but it taught me to teach.
Can I ask you a question that you can deny or pass on?
Sure.
I'm thinking, how do you financially do this, like as a PhD student for 4 years? Is
Um,
there like stipends? Do you get admitted to the program and then like they pay for your housing? Like, how do you live when you're
so
doing
this is a super important question because a lot of people don't know. There are programs, many programs, especially those of higher quality. I'm sorry, that's the ice cream truck. So programs of higher quality that would actually give you a stipend. And the amount I'm not gonna get into, but it is very low income
it? Okay. But you're
because
getting paid to do the PhD. Is that
and you're
fair
getting a
to say?
tuition waiver. So
Say that
the
again?
money you get a tuition waiver. You don't pay tuition.
Right. So you're not paying
Right.
this big money that you did for an undergrad degree for the most part.
So I had one classmate that kept a job while
Hmm.
he was doing the PhD. Most of us knew that we couldn't.
And he was
Some people
he
have
was crazy.
spouses. Yeah, well, he had to economically, he had obligations, right? Some
Sure.
people have spouses that help. Most of us kind of get used to living, and I mean this, it is, I'm gonna say it because it's true. It is kind of like poverty levels because you aren't making any money beyond what you need for um s- for living and groceries. However, I acknowledge that people in poverty levels can live much worse than a PhD student does.
Sure, sure.
The
But
luxury of graduate housing that also saves money. So the
so
thing
you get
is, what I
great, so you
want,
get housing, you get a small stipend, and you get your tuition waived, right? You're
yeah,
not paying to do this. So if you're truly a romantic, and this seems like,
yeah,
but for me, as with somebody with no spouse, no
right.
kids, I don't know what your situation is.
Same,
Like,
same.
this is a route that seems like kind of like with the rise of the dark academia. It's all over my TikTok. I'm reading these like dark books about, I don't know, this one picture of Dorian Gray,
Oh, love
some
it.
classics. Like,
Yeah,
to me, it seems like a romantic idea, but to actually go through it for 4 years might be a different story. And I totally resonate
yeah.
with that. And I
I
get
had
that.
a little help from my family.
Sure. But
And by
you were,
little,
where were you living? Were you living in like the
I was living on
dorms of
campus.
Florida,
Yeah, I was living in
University
Gainesville,
of Florida?
Florida. And so if I had the type of help that I got from my families, for example, my mom bought me a car. So super, that's a big luxury. There is
Heck yeah.
graduate, there is bus. So, and also she would buy my tickets to go visit home.
Sure.
So it wasn't as bad that she needed to give me money for school, thankfully, because honestly, pesos to dollars, we wouldn't have been able to do it. But
Mhm.
I did have privileges that not every graduate student has. I did get some help from my
I
mom.
appreciate you acknowledging that. And that's, some people get more help, some people get less help. And I think that's really great to clarify. And still, to me, that, that's still like pushing it. And still like, and it's a big transition. But yeah, I think then the day of a life of a PhD student, how many, like, are you sitting in classes,
Yeah,
seminars, discussing, like, it's not like the undergraduate experience, or I'm assuming the master's experience, like, which can range, but what's a
yeah,
day in the life of like a third year before you really get dig into your
yeah.
dissertation? I'm sure, like, you're meeting with your advisor and you're just checking
Exactly.
in a lot and going to these seminar classes and doing research? Like, walk me
Yeah.
through it.
So depending on how many credits you bring in, I did bring credits from my master's, so that saved me a few classes. You're going to take some classes. You're always going to take research classes, methods classes, because most of us don't come into a PhD with the level of research that you need to know to do it. And then you're going to be meeting with your advisor. You're going to be teaching and preparing your classes or working as a research
Ah,
assistant.
right. Because you ideally you'll be as a TA or a research assistant, you're saying.
Yeah. I can honestly say if I was awake, I was working.
Do you think now with AI and ChatGPT,
Yeah.
like, not saying to write your dissertation, I mean, I'm sure it could actually
Yeah.
do something not good, but with the outlining and structuring, have you explored that? And like, I know you're
Yeah.
far from that and you're publishing other stuff, but do you think it would help like mitigate some of the stressors of like, okay, help me organize my thoughts, like,
I think
what's the
there's a
next
lot.
steps?
I
Have you
would be
interacted with it?
surprised. I haven't interacted with ChatGPT. I would be surprised if somebody at the dissertation level would be using it for anything. However, I can see its benefit, like for writing emails to your students. So
Yeah.
take this into consideration. In every PhD program, there's a big percentage of us that are not native English speakers. Now,
Mhm.
I learned English when I was 9 years old. I've been immersed in the language all my life, and I still have an accent. Imagine people who maybe learned as an adult or had less access to the language and now are doing a high, a terminal degree in
Right.
another language.
Right.
So things like, a software that can help you write an email that you're not going to have to agonize
Because
about
it could
making
take
sure.
like about it could take people. I've seen my interns take hours crafting emails, and I'm like, dude, let me just do this real quick. Like, and you get experience, but like it can add up. It takes a lot of time and practice to perfect a decent email. And people will see that as they're getting into their agency life. They get stressed
Yeah.
about things, they're unsure about etiquette and like how much to put in spacing.
Yeah.
It's a learning curve and it does take hours to do that. So what I was saying was, I think you're agreeing that there are tools now with like AI and Grammarly and ChatGPT and Midjourney for creative. There are some tools that can help kind of like organize thoughts, not write the content for
Right.
you. But for me, I'll use it to outline a press release.
Right.
I'm like, here are my thoughts. How should I outline this? And it'll give me amazing advice. And it'll also do grammar checks.
I think
So
anyone that writes for a living in one way or another, and teachers and professors who we write for a living, whatever else we do, knows that the most difficult is that first draft. After you have something on paper,
yeah.
editing is a lot
Yeah, it's
easier.
just a really good first step. So I was just curious, like you say like you mentioned that the standards are getting higher with publications and like you're seeing PhD students getting featured or published in these journals, but also now that might be the expectation, but now with technology and like these advanced AI tools, like to structure your thoughts and get first drafts and you can actually interact and say like, what do you think about this? Like you have like a full on somebody that can pass the bar
Yeah.
that can help you and like interact. So I'm just that was just something I was curious about.
I don't know. I think it's a great question that I guess we'll see how it goes. I think there's an ethical question there too, in terms of how much of it is your work, and there's just facts that can't be verified. Writing a
Of course.
literature review takes a lot of time. So one of the things is when the deeper you are in the field, the longer you're in it, the easier it becomes because you already know the language. You don't necessarily have to go back to look at all that was written on that topic because you've already written on it. So it does get easier. I think being a PhD student, that is the most difficult part because you're just learning as you go
Yeah.
and the demands are very high. Um, and I think, besides the fact of just developing the field that is as it is going to be practiced, I just love having some influence, and I hope positive influence on the life of future professionals. I care a lot about this field, and I want the people who have been through my class and through our program to be good and responsible practitioners. I care about that a lot. So I love that my work can have
Mhm.
some impact on that.
And let's get to it. I think also So you finish up. Let's get back to the story, and we'll connect the dots, and we'll talk about what you're doing now. So when you got your PhD, where did you apply to? Was DePaul the first school, and that's where you landed?
No. So one of the things about when you get your PhD is that you can't control who's going to be looking, right? So maybe you dreamt of working at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, but they're just not hiring that year.
Sure.
So you have to apply where there is available. I can't tell you specifically where I applied because some I remember, some I don't, but I do remember that I applied for 14 jobs. And I got 2 offers. So I was
That's a pretty good
fortunate
rate.
that I was able to choose where to go.
That's a
Um,
great rate. If everybody, a lot of people would love that. But you
it
have this degree, right? And you have the credentials. It makes sense. But so where were the 2 schools?
So one of them is, oh my God, I think it's James Madison University, and the other was North Carolina State University. And I loved both schools. There was great experience, but I chose to go to North Carolina State University because I thought I needed a place that was going to give me more time for research. I already knew that I could do the teaching. I had great reviews in my classroom. I needed to invest time on doing more research. So I ended up going to North Carolina State University for a couple of years, and I loved it there. It was a great program.
So they give
Um,
you less of a teaching load,
yes,
more for
because it's
research.
more of a research centered school. Right. So
Right.
if you end up in a teaching school, you have more teaching, less research time.
Did you not
Uh,
want that?
I knew that I could do the teaching. And I knew that. So I'm one of those professors that if you give me, 20 hours to prepare my class, I will use all of it because I'm always adding to it. I'm always looking for new things. I love the teaching part so much. And I don't think the research for me comes naturally. That's why I do topics that I'm super passionate about
It
because
makes it easier.
that's what's gonna get me down to sit down writing. Some people prefer the research part to the teaching part. I prefer the teaching part to the research part.
But this is
Um,
interesting. So you prefer the teaching, but you allocated more time for research. Is that
So
correct?
if you're not a strong researcher, you are not going to have your choice of jobs.
If you're not a strong researcher, won't have your. Got it.
You will have a lot less opportunities in the job market. And I knew that of the 2, because I'm not saying I'm a bad researcher for the record, I
Right.
love my research,
Sure.
but I knew that of the 2, I needed more time for my research than for my teaching.
Got it. And then this whole tenure track process, you want to become tenured, right? And isn't
Yeah.
that the ultimate goal?
If you are in a tenured position, yes, that is the ultimate goal. And I did go up for tenure. And so I switched to the Paul 2 years in. No, I didn't run away from North Carolina at the country. They were wonderful. I ran towards something else. And it was honestly the appeal of living in Chicago. I just always loved the city. And it was a great experience. So I don't regret it at all. So yeah, sometimes opportunities come up. You will have somebody call you and be like, "Oh, Maria, we think this is a good fit for you." You still, of course, after that, you apply and you have to, get chosen. But I was fortunate to get that job. And I went through the tenure process in Chicago, and that's where I had to have all my research. And I was fortunate to be able to keep up with the pace and their demands. And by the time I went up to tenure, even though I was nervous, there's always nerves, I was confident that I was in good shape.
So you go up for tenure
Yeah, you
and
apply.
you apply after. When do you know that you can apply? Do they say, all right, you're good to go?
There's something called the tenure clock, and anybody who's either thinking about a PhD is trembling right now, as I mentioned, the tenure clock, because you apply your 5th year.
At the institution that you worked at, after the 5th year, you want to apply for tenure.
And then it takes a year, that whole process. And
And
if you make tenure, you are welcome. And if you don't make tenure, you are welcome to look for another job.
No way. They kick you out?
They give you a year. Most places will give you some time, but they give you a year to find another job. Yeah. If you are in a
You
tenure
have
track,
to go through it at year 5 for the most part. Can you
unless
extend?
right. If you have a medical, a
Oh,
family
but
emergency.
it's coming. So do people like usually dip out if they're not ready? But they
You
go through
can,
it strong. They're like,
you
let's do this
can,
thing,
yeah.
whether or not I'm ready or not, or I'm confident we're going to do this.
Oh no, I think that most of the people that I know personally would not have applied for tenure if they didn't think they could make it.
Right. But
Because
didn't you say that they force you to do it at year 5?
right, but you can move institutions.
Gotcha. So like, yeah, got it.
So if you think, like for example, if I'm at Tennessee, which thankfully I'm tenured here already, but if I were at
Oh,
Tennessee and I'm like, you know, this is an institution where I don't think I can meet the research requirements, then I would start year 3 to look for another job.
right. You're gonna map that out and try to
Because
skedaddle.
what nobody can expect is to be the exception.
Mm-hmm.
That would be unethical, right? It would be unethical to say, well, I love Maria. She's great. She's a great teacher. She doesn't have the research, but we love her. No,
No,
you
you have
have to have the same criteria.
gotcha. What's the process like? I know this
Yeah.
is just really interesting to me.
So let's see, you have qualifying exams, different places call it different things. Some call it comps, as in comprehensive examinations, other call it quals, as in qualifying. And basically they are big questions that they can ask you about anything regarding all your studies of the
Mhm. Give
field.
me give me a sample question.
One of
Like
my senior,
if breaking and entering was my field of study, let's say, and
yeah,
you were
so
qualifying round for me, what would the question be?
something like what is the most influential or what is the most influential I don't know, practices of principles you have learned during this show and why, right? So
Got
you
it.
have to define influential. Let's start by that. So you start by saying, well, influential according to so and so.
Oh,
So
you have to source it out.
you
Everything has to be backed
one
by.
one of my answers was 12 pages, right? So
But
it's
is
like,
it verbal or is it written for the
it is
quals?
written. Verbal, I would have cried. Written, I was a journalist. I can write it. Verbal would be horrible. But you do have a verbal defense after. So they sit with your answers and they ask you follow-up questions. My verbal defense, thank God, was good because sometimes it can be a little contentious if you have got gaping holes that honestly you shouldn't have at that level. But think about this, people can get nervous. Like you can blank out. There's so much
How do
writing on
you got to
this.
practice though?
You practice, you do. I
I'm amped up. This is awesome. This is
the
like exciting to me.
the morning of my defense, I got physically ill.
Nice.
It was horrible.
That's awesome.
It was so scary. And the defense went so well. And I think about it today and I'm like, why was I nervous? But I was
I
so
mean,
nervous.
you can get in a room with somebody that's a bad day and they don't,
I know, yeah.
or
You never
whatever. You
know.
never know. I get it.
Yeah.
Like you can be prepared and yeah. So,
And then
okay.
you defend, well, there's another part because you asked this a big
Oh
answer.
yeah, keep it going. I
You
think this is
have
awesome.
the dissertation proposal. So the proposal is your idea and your preliminary work, and you have to defend that. At UF, we defended both the same day.
Nice. Back
So
to
you
back.
get approved, and then you're a candidate, and you get to sign your emails, PhD candidate instead of PhD student. And I can tell you that was freaking exciting. I was like, yes, PhD candidate. And that's usually when you start looking for a job because I was hired for the poll in October of the year previous to when I started in August. So you get hired way ahead of time. Here, I started mid-year, so it was a little weird. But the normal route is you
This
get
is
hired.
exciting stuff. I'm
It's a
enthralled.
lot. It's a lot.
I'm glad
So
I'm not going through it.
then you do your research. And depending on, I did in-depth interviews, I did theory building, that was fun. It took me a while to teach myself the method because it's called grounded theory, which is basically how to build a theory from the data that you're looking at. And I hadn't gotten a class on that, so I had to teach myself how to do that. I had a wonderful methodological advisor. She helped me with that. And then you defend the dissertation. But again, this is where mentors are so important. My advisor, I knew he would not have let me defend if I wasn't ready. And that's what I kept telling myself. If my dissertation weren't ready, Dr. Marietta would not have let me defend.
Nice.
And it was ready, and the edits were thankfully minimal. And then you're a doctor.
Got
And you
it.
get told Dr. De Moya for the first time, and you try not to cry. And of course, I cried.
Dr. De
It was
Moya.
great. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. And then the tenure track process at the university, very similar, you're saying, where they kind of like,
No, well, you don't have exams anymore. You
no, but
have requirements. So, how much, what are your teaching evaluations supposed to be like? How many research papers are you supposed to have? Depending on the school, they care about something called impact factor. I can't tell you for the life of me how it's calculated.
every
I am
school is
sure
different. It's like it's
different schools. So
they have some sort of. Are you bringing in credibility to the institution? Are you making a change in the world? How is it
it's usually to the field.
to the
So
field?
they
To the
don't,
field.
yeah, they don't evaluate so much what are you doing for us as an institution,
How have
but
you
what are you doing for
furthered the knowledge of public relations?
that
How have
is it.
you
Yeah.
grown, increased the ceiling of knowledge? That sounds terrible.
It is difficult because I have not been at a school where they give you a number.
They don't know. They're just like
They
42.
just like, yeah, oh, have sufficient publications. And you're like, what is that? So most of us try to guess based on who made it to tenure before. You're like, oh, Joe had this many, and Juan had this many, therefore I probably
Seems
want to
like they
be.
need to have a transparent rubric or something behind it.
The
Because
thing is,
then
it's not apples and apples. It isn't. You're not
I'd be like,
comparing.
how is it weighted? Is there like a similar, is there like, can you walk us through the process? Because then I'd be like, well, is there bias in here?
Of course,
Why
there's
is it? Yeah.
a lot of bias.
Why is this
In
person like, how did you judge that? But all of this kind of gets into a final score. You're saying that they go yay or nay for tenure.
the faculty, again, depending on the college, but the process that I went through, it's similar in different places. The faculty will vote. It's an anonymous vote. So
Mm-hmm.
what I got is how many out of how many voted to support my tenure.
Mm-hmm.
Then that vote goes to the dean, and the dean can turn it down or affirm the vote. Most deans, unless they know something, the faculty doesn't about the candidate, will move it forward. And then it goes to the provost. And again, unless, well, at the university level, you have an interview, a whole thing. And then again, unless the provost knows something that nobody else knows, then you get approved. But it's not official until the provost awards you tenure.
And then you have a job forever.
Then I have a job unless I do something illegal. Or yeah,
What's illegal?
I don't know. I guess stealing from the university. I don't know. There have to be.
I mean, like, let's say you download a document that like what it.
No idea. The funny thing is, I've always said this, and I've never thought about it. Really, I don't know what would get somebody with tenure fired.
Right,
I
you're
think
something
it
insanely
has to be
inappropriate,
with,
insanely illegal, for
it
sure.
has to be
If you're
with
going to jail, you're probably going to get fired in any job.
I'm sure if you don't show up to any of your classes, you get fired, right? There has to be, but usually the idea of tenure is that it will give you academic freedom. So basically, without the pressures of trying to keep your supervisors happy.
Yeah, you can tell them to F off.
You don't have to be afraid to research the topics you want to research.
Right, it gives you this freedom. And do you feel that? Or is there more stress now for some reason?
There's another level of promotion after.
Okay, but there's always something higher up. I get that. And that's a deeper psychological thing about humans, about not being happy. There's like the pursuit of happiness, like looking at something higher up. But did you feel this weight off your shoulders? I'm curious, like, has it reflected in your research? Are you taking time off on research? Is there still like a standard that you need to hit?
I felt a weight off my shoulders. I felt relieved.
You were at the ball when you first got your first time?
I felt grateful. And I had a lot more work. That's what people, because you do more service when you're tenured.
For the university?
Yeah.
Oh, but that's not, I mean, that's like being on committees and like you enjoy that, right?
That's how I became chair, which is a lot of work. work.
Right. More
So
more administration,
yeah.
more feeding into the tenure. Like you're probably sitting in, you're probably doing these evaluations, you're probably assessing the curriculum. Got it.
Mm.
Is that
But
right?
I want to, I mean, because I hear myself and I'm like, oh, you're making this sound horrible and whiny. I have never regretted my choice, not once regretted my choice of going into academia. I
You
haven't
sure?
always loved 100%. I haven't always loved the process. I haven't, always agreed with everything.
It's
I
an
do
old
think
school process.
it's
It's super
very
old school, and I
antiquated. It
get it
really
for like somebody that's studying English and old
right.
like Shakespearean literature, where it's like, okay, there's these, but with PR and advertising and mass communications is an ever evolving field, and like it to me, it can seem like these old school processes probably should adapt a little bit for this specific sector of knowledge, but you could probably make the case for all these advanced fields,
So
biology or whatever.
there are a couple of things that as I think back on as a young professional, I liked in-house work more than agency because I wanted to know everything about my client. Like I
Deeper.
don't remember reading where I read it, but I know I read it somewhere. It said that nobody should know more about an organization than their communications person. And
Mhm.
I thought that's absolutely right. And second of all, when I started in media, I was so afraid of becoming obsolete because I started at a time when the technology was changing. And as a professor, if you are worth a fourth of your salary, you're keeping up with everything because you are the one that needs to get that student ready for that first day at that agency, right?
But
You
then
can't,
couldn't you find the same value as being like a senior lecturer?
oh, the salaries are not the
Yeah,
same.
right.
And I do enjoy the time to research
To dive
and
deep.
I do. I do enjoy like I've worked on a paper for a year. That's not ideal, but some projects
Mhm.
take more time than others. So I never thought about becoming a lecturer. I always thought if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna
You're
go.
gonna go all in.
Yeah. I
Got
don't
it.
think there's anything wrong with being a lecturer. I think that it's just a different experience. And again, you're gonna get bored of me saying this, but it depends on the school.
Of course.
Every school has a different culture.
Got it. Well, we've talked a while, and I want to give you your chance now. Any advice? I guess we were talking about the PhD process, and I'm really glad because you, like I said, you're one of our like first terminal degree. You're a doctor. I mean, this has been really eye-opening for me. I think it's really interesting. I'm always curious about different career, and like this is a career path within
Yeah.
advertising that people cannot uh, I think they should be educated on. Like there might be people that are in the classroom now that love it. So I'm glad we talked about this. But any other like practical, I guess not practical, or like for those that are not looking for academia, what advice do you have for people going agency route? With the lens of the PhD, I think it would be super, super fascinating as well.
I think honestly, in so I've mentored many students. I keep in touch with graduates, and I've observed that what makes the difference between a successful practitioner and one that isn't is somebody who knows how to learn and who's always learning. I do have some students that think that they're going to get everything from the classroom, and I tell them that's a bad way of looking at this. You're in a field that is always evolving. You might be working with a client that is, a sneaker brand, and then work for a pharmaceutical company, and
Yeah,
you
you're
have
gonna have a lot.
learn quickly. You have to be curious. So for me, that's the best advice. If you're somebody who wants to be doing the same thing over and over again, this is not the field for you. If you're somebody who's curious, who's excited to learn, in addition to the creative, because that's the thing, a lot of students get stuck on how cool the tools are that we use, and they are cool. I love them, but you have to be excited about ideas and strategy too.
They're
And
in service to the big idea. They can maybe help you get there faster, but you have to be obsessed with the big idea for sure. I
and they're
totally,
gonna change. The tools are gonna change. I
of course,
mean,
you got to learn those too. You got to be
yeah,
curious. You can't, and then you can't be obsolete when, like you said, that was one of your biggest fears, and that's all of our biggest fears as these technologies are coming. And the best way to not be obsolete is to learn how to use the tools. to
Yeah,
get
and
to
that's
the big
also
ideas faster, those human truths faster. And if you don't know them, then yeah, like I know some people that don't know how to work their laptop that are older, and it's not because it ages them, it's because they refuse to learn.
I think that is it's so frustrating for people who have to work for them. I had
Oh yeah.
a professor that I TA'd for that they would have me do their PowerPoint slide, like literally click through the slides, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
like you're just sitting one on one, and people listening will have bosses like that. So you
that is
can,
not, yeah.
hey, I'll tell you what, if I got tenured, I'd probably be like that too, though. Eventually, I'd probably be like, no,
I think there's a difference between being a diva, which you will find a few,
yeah,
and not knowing how to use a basic office tool, right?
yeah,
And I think she just was reluctant to learn. She just
right.
like, I know what I know, and I'm not gonna
We
um
see that. Don't be that person. So I love that
not be that
advice,
person. You're not gonna be happy in advertising and public relations if you're that person. You're gonna get stuck very quickly,
and you'll get fired, or
eventually.
yeah, you got to know
Yeah,
stuff. So, Dr. Demoya,
that's it.
Ph.D. Thank you so much for talking. And how can people reach out to you? I'm sure they were going to want to learn more about you and the school and your advice. This was an amazing lesson and introduction to the PhD route, but how could they reach out to you for further information?
Oh, absolutely. You can find me on the Tombras School of Advertising and Public Relations website, María de Moya. Email is the best way. Please connect via LinkedIn if I see that you have anything remotely similar to my interest. I connect with people right away.
Yeah,
And
leave a note. Tell them if you're listening, leave a note. Say you listen to your episode on Breaking Entering.
and I would love to answer your questions. Like if you thought about a PhD and you're like, oh, this is embarrassing, I don't know anything. I promise you I knew less than you probably do just by listening to this episode. You already know more than I did when I got into the PhD program. And
Yeah,
I will tell you, you know, what it is, because I think I would love for people to make this choice. But I always think people should make informed choices.
heck yeah. Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. And I'll also put that in the show notes. And you've been great. Thank you again.
Thank you.